Robots Radio presents...
Today's chat is brought to you by the support of all our Twitch subscribers. Through the patronage you provide the Focus Fire chat team through the Twitch platform, we are able to provide you with the weekly podcast as well as the website and other aspects of Focus Fire chat. If you have any interest in becoming a subscriber of the FFC and gaining access to some exclusive features over in the Discord server, please be sure to visit our Twitch account and click on the subscribe button. If you're an Amazon Prime member, remember that you do have a free subscription to Twitch every month that can be used for this. And for those of you who are already subscribers, thank you again for your generosity.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat. Explore together.
Welcome to Focus Fire Chat, recorded live on October 2nd, 2020, over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat, as we continue our discussion over the upcoming hikeable Europa. This particular episode will serve as what we have come to call the advanced session of the week's exploration. Congratulations to those who signed up for a deeper dive. Before we go any further, however, let's run through a quick introduction of who all we have with us on the show. As always, this is your host, Blue Crew 86.
And this is the... With the help of chat, and hey, it's Orchid, our newest member of FFC, we have been creating a language with the ables at the end of it. So, this is the green-eyed music lover, able. Green-eyed music lover.
I would say greenable.
Greenable says that he is not responsible.
Loverable?
Yeah, greenable.
Yeah, Blue's not responsible. But yeah, we got Orchid here.
Yay!
Otterable. Yee! It's been,
enjoyable.
We are not
Anyway.
Enjoyable.
That's an actual word.
Yeah.
That's new.
I'm good at this.
Oh
this is one of the few things that I'm decent at.
Responsible. That's another one. Thanks, Chad.
Man. So just real quick, couple of special announcements. Just to remind people, Please be sure to check out thelorenetwork.com. Let us know what your thoughts are on the new site layout that we have going over there, whether or not we can do anything that makes it a little bit more manageable for you or usable for you. On top of that, if you are interested, Loot Crate is doing a Destiny limited, it's like their legendary crate that they did for Halo, but it's for Destiny. We have an affiliate link with Loot Crate. If you guys are going to be picking up that crate and you would like to support our show, we would appreciate it. That will be included with the show notes over on our Podbean website, and just click on that, and then I believe the code is Robots Radio when you go to checkout. I don't believe there's a discount off the quarterly crates, but the regular crates, there is I think it's like a 10 or 15% discount off of that with that code. So be sure to check that out. Other than that, as Green mentioned, we'd like to extend a very warm welcome to the new show co-host, Orchid. She is here forever and ever and will never leave. Anyways, now moving on.
Whoa.
She's taking over. She's taking over. Slowly but surely.
One podcast at a time.
Yeah!
The Otter Army is moving in. But yeah, so I know everyone is actually looking forward to diving into this one. I think with this particular episode, we're going to look at some of the information that we got concerning the actual, what's referred to as the frozen frontier. So this is going to be kind of opening up and looking at the map that we've seen for Europa, as well as talking about the dynamic weather that they developed. It's a brand new system that they're going to introduce into Destiny, and it sounds really cool. It sounds like they've done a lot of work, and I'm actually really excited to see how that goes over. But real quick, Green, Orchid, did I forget anything? I don't think I did, but I might have.
I don't think so. I think we are ready to dive into the frozen frontier.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so we, again, we're going to be talking about the information that we've gotten from a couple of the articles, the hub page over on Bungie.net, and then also at current time, the most recent Europa trailer that they released. This particular episode will probably be focused more on, I believe the article was titled, let me double check, 100% Chance of Snow, which was released on September 23rd. And I have all these informations. I'll include the document that I have all this collected on in the show notes as well for anybody who wants to go check that out. Similar to the stasis document that I made, it's kind of just a collection point of all the information that we've gotten from the dev spotlights for this particular topic. So let's just dive in here. It's described as a frozen frontier through a lot of the material that we've gotten. And there's quotes that say things like, "The frozen frontier of Europa holds many lost secrets from the past. You must brave the unknown, infiltrate the Golden Age Braytech facility, and uncover what lies deep under the ancient ice before your enemy, Aramis the Kell of Darkness, bestows a new dark power on her fallen forces." We also have references to it being a frozen Golden Age graveyard, and repeated references that beyond the surface lies a secret. So we're going to be getting it sounds like a lot of areas that are discoverable when we go through this hikeable area. The big sections that are called out on the map currently are the Eventide Ruins, the Asterian Abyss, Cadmus Ridge, Karen's Crossing, and beyond. Now, there's some really cool tidbits hidden within those names. Right now, currently, the only thing that we have reference to them on the site are just these little like flavor text clips. I didn't know, Green, do you want to read those so I don't just talk everybody's ear off?
Yeah, so the Eventide Ruins has once home to thousands of settlers, and now that all remains of Clovis Bray's colony. And now all that remains of Clovis Bray colony. Asterion Abyss says, "The vexed structures visible on the surface are only the tip of the iceberg." Cadmus Ridge says, "A snowy landscape and the last known location of the buried Bray exoscience facility." So possible Deepstone Crypt area. Charon's Crossing, "The site of Europa's communication center and the origin of a distress signal sent by Varix." And then beyond, "An old friend awaits us in this clearing that overlooks the conflict between light and dark." Fun little straight up Exostranger reference there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely, and I kind of called that out. I was like, the friend mentioned here is most likely the Exostranger. I think that's the cutscene that we've seen with the Exostranger, Eris, and Drifter on that plane. I think that's the beyond.
Orchid, would you want to go over a little bit of where we know Asterion from before, like the Asterian's Abyss? Because Eventide doesn't have any sort of like background things besides it's just a name and a location.
Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that I see here for Asterian's Abyss, we have all the references to Greek mythology. We have the river god of Argos, who's a son of Oceanus and Tethys. We have the king of Crete is also referred to as Asterius, and it's the name of the Minotaur who dwelled at the center of the labyrinth of Crete. So it's another labyrinth reference, because we seem to be collecting those like Pokemon.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're cool looking.
They are
Eris
cool looking.
Needs to stop doing her little Zen garden underneath the pyramid.
I don't believe you. Continue.
Cadmus Ridge. Let's do some more Greek mythology now.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All
Yeah.
the Greek mythology.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we do this one,
Orchid.
too?
Yeah, I do.
All right. Did you already read the flavor text for this one?
Yeah, the little red text.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is also a reference within Greek mythology. It's the founder and first king of Thebes. He was the son of King Agnar and Queen... Oh, you are stretching me. Telephassa of Tyre. God, words are hard.
Telephassa. You were really close. Mm-hmm.
I think, words. His siblings were Phoenix, Cilix, and Europa. Interesting. I wonder where that name came from. In addition to the founding of Thebes, Cadmus is also known as the man who brought writing and the alphabet to the Greeks from the Phoenicians.
Interesting. Yeah, so kind of a call out since it's an exo-science facility from Clovis Bray in that area. It's likely the location of where the Deepstone Crypt will be.
Right.
Or at least the entrance to it.
Yeah.
Blue, you have in here in the purple section, that's from the old flavor text, isn't it? From D1?
So that's actually, the purple text is actually from Beyond Light's hub page.
Okay.
So that was actually referenced. They talk about the Deepstone Crypt as below the frozen tundra of Europa. For decades, it has remained dormant. If you look at again, kind of what you were saying there, the exoscience facility, it's a snowy landscape that kind of translated in my head. I was kind of equating that to a frozen tundra. So that's kind of where I was like, it's the only thing so far that has been called out as being related to exoscience. I'm not saying that it is, but that's why I said it's like the possible location. The other thing that was the other location that I could see it potentially being is Eventide Ruins, but Eventide struck me more as a habitat zone than a work zone. And we know that Clovis Bray, if Venus is anything to go off of, Clovis Bray had segregated zones for like habitats and then work zones and research zones, and even within those the labs were segregated between different research projects as well. So it would make sense to me that Cadmus is where we see the Deepstone Crypt, whereas Eventide is more of that's the recreational home area.
What about Charon's Crossing? That one's a pretty famous name in Greek mythology with isn't that the dog?
No, Charon is the ferryman of Hades.
Oh, right. Cerberus is the dog.
The dog, yeah. So Charon's Crossing Charon is often referred to as the spiritual guide of souls to the place of the dead. He's what is his archetype, his figure is what's referred to as a psychopomp. It's an actual entity. So Charon is a psychopomp. He is responsible for carrying the souls of newly deceased across the river Styx. The river Styx is an important figure. It's an important thing, figure / entity. It's kind of all of the above within Greek mythology because its main purpose is to divide the world of the living from the world of the dead. Namely, the reason why Charon had to have a ferry is because neither the living nor the dead could really touch Styx. Styx as a body of water was deadly to basically everything. So he was the only way across one way or the other. So that was where you see Charon's Crossing is. And then I like the fact that Charon's Crossing is also the communication center because it's literally the one place that you can communicate to and from Europa. Is the kind of the idea that I was getting from it.
Nice. And then the Beyond we already mentioned is likely where the Exo Stranger is based off the flavor text. Before we go into the terrain and the weather systems and everything like that in there, I do want to call out the 2 pieces of lore that mention Europa currently. This is just like actual cards, and there's one in D2 and there's one in D1. The one in D2 is from the ship card Solar Sails, and it is likely based off of the workers going out to the Bray.
Yeah, that's the one that they were throwing a fit because they were like, ugh.
Yeah, you mentioned it in the intro session. And then the second one is the Ghost Fragment Legends 2, where it's mentioned that the 9 are, what are they? Something on the tarot carbon pits. The 9 are ancient Leviathan intelligence from the seas of Europa or the hydrocarbon pits of Titan. So it's just a singular mention there. It's that what Blue loves to call the gather information card, the adventure time. Roll totally for your adventure.
It totally is the gather information card.
It is advertible time, by the way, too.
Okay, perfect. Solar Sails is the one that actually does look like a sailboat. So yeah, I actually really like the Solar Sails aesthetic for the ship.
Yes. So, should we go to an ad break real quick and then come back and dive into some more
The inclement weather.
The fun, cold, like, just, yeah. We'll be right back.
I'm Bob.
And I'm Brad. We're lifelong friends.
And the hosts of the Film and Whiskey Podcast. This is the show where each week we review a classic movie and a glass of whiskey.
That's right. Every week we go in-depth on a well-known movie while sampling the best from the world of scotch, bourbon, and more.
Because nothing goes better with strong opinion than equally strong liquor.
Bob's a movie nerd.
Brad's an average Joe.
But together, we give fresh insights and hot takes on the world of movies and spirits.
So check out the Film and Whiskey Podcast.
Part of the Robots Radio Network.
So it was a bit of a chilly departure. So let's come back and...
Oh, well done, sir. Well done. Now,
man, I'll have to be honest. This particular article that they did was so cool to read. We don't get. I think the lightest TWAB, they kind of did a similar thing with the faces, like they were explaining the mechanics of the faces and everything. But they did a really cool thing, and they kind of pulled the curtain back and actually let the developers of these systems talk about all the crazy stuff that they do. So they had a couple of the Europa design leads talking. Let's see. The introduction is, I'm just going to quote this because it's so great. He says, "The crunch of your boots in the snow makes you aware of the silence, a silence that is short-lived. It starts as a light gust, carrying away the gentle flakes of snow that rest on your shoulders. Then, without warning, it hits you. A sudden wave of frozen air cuts through your armor. The hut in the distance seems further away, harder to see. You lean into the wind as it grows in strength. Frost begins to spread across your helm, and the storm howls as Europa challenges your every step. The squall envelops you, and your destination vanishes into the white."
The Eris trailer back in, I want to say it was like June, whenever Eris was moving through the frozen landscape, you see her leaning forward and kind of fighting against this whale of a wind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, you see it with, all three of the figures actually have a bit of this environmental challenge. Like the stranger, you see it, though the stranger's is more because her sparrow kicks it up, but then also Drifter has it where he's flying through a bit of a thing. He also has a respirator, which is really, I like seeing that particular piece of hardware actually getting shown. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah. What about the next section where Europa design lead Alex Velicki recalls, "We were brainstorming and Ed Brennan."
So cool.
Huh?
I said this was what I was talking about. This is so cool because he explains the process of them coming up with this.
Gotcha. So Ed Brennan, Europa World Art Lead, proposed the idea of a blizzard to help sell the fantasy of a harsh environment. "I thought it would be awesome if design had direct control over it, and it didn't take long for everyone to get excited about the implementation." So is this something, now this is just me throwing out a question, is this something we think is going to be a physical detriment causing us to move slower through our environment?
Yes, it is, actually. They'll go on to explain it. There's actually 3 different stages. There's aesthetics. There's an aesthetic style that transfers from what they call no storm to light storm to heavy storm. And the aesthetic styles also correlate with actual gameplay impacts. And they actually talked about the process of going through it. I know Dino said that was the original one. I think it was the heavy storm originally was gonna screw up how your gun and grenades actually interacted. So in the heavy storm, if you threw a grenade, it would actually not go where you aimed. It would actually get blown off course. I think they ultimately scrapped that and went with something a little bit gentler for us, but it was really cool listening to hearing about it, because he says, finding the balance was crucial here, because the initial implementation of slowing player movement, altering grenade paths, and even knocking players off their sparrows, which that sounds amazing, proved too harsh. Because I really, actually, going back, I really like the idea that you have to be careful when you're riding a sparrow in a heavy wind or heavy storm. Like, that makes sense. That actually does make perfect sense. So because the balance that they're trying to do is they want to create a sense of space that was treacherous to the players, but actually not frustrating. And that's a very delicate line to walk. And this is where they actually start talking about the development of this dynamic system. And he says, while most other weather systems experienced previously in Destiny have been fairly simple, the team wanted to, in this case, create something more dynamic and scripted. And so they actually spent an enormous amount of time watching actual nature videos. And so they went through and they found that, they could script the weather in a way that was similar to the systems found in Destiny's activities. And this also gave them the ability to create the storms on demand. So they now have something where they can toggle the storms as you hit like certain parts.
That's cool.
Oh yeah, it's so cool. Like, just reading how they developed this was really, really interesting. So and that ties into the aesthetics of the different storms. So and this kind of goes back to, they were saying, knowing that real storms don't just suddenly appear and disappear with the exact same features every time, the team looked at different ways that they could immerse players into oncoming and departing storms. And so that's where you get these three different types. So they basically developed a handful of variables that, when they were blended, could organically grow or diminish a storm based off the needs of the story and the environment. And this was where they said they researched just tons of material, which includes nature documentaries and all this different cool stuff. And that's where you get no storm, light storm, and heavy storm. And I don't know if you want to talk about the aesthetics there that I have noted.
Yeah, Orchid, are you able to go through the no storm sections and the descriptions that he has in there for it?
All right. No Storm says, this is what Europa would look like without the new weather system. Clear skies, fresh snow, perfect skiing weather. Consider this the smoothest sailing you'll do on the icy moon. I assume that would mean, use whatever scope you want. You're not going to have any problem shooting enemies or seeing things with your scope from 5 miles away.
Mm-hmm. So you might have some like drifting of snow and stuff like that, but it's not going to be like
flurries, maybe.
Flurries. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And then the light storm, wind picks up, snowfall increases around you, and is largely aesthetic. So still not a thing that's actually going to affect your abilities or your gunplay or anything like that. It's literally there just to help warn you that, hey, things are starting to possibly get bad for you soon if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go back and you read the heavy storm?
Sure. The heavy storm says, wind roars and the snow flurries become even more violent. The mid-ground is difficult to see, and if not for the faintly visible silhouettes, it would be nearly impossible to navigate at all. Players are encouraged to stick closer to cover and move with intent.
You know what this reminds me of? Do you remember the cutscene before Rise of Iron where the wolves, or not the wolves, the devil splicers come through the wall, and it's mostly because of dark, but it was also a snowy landscape that they used for that release. And that imagery that they use there of them coming from the dark is going to help make it look a lot more adrenaline rush, because the enemies are much closer and probably going to be quite deadly as well. So it's not necessarily a jump scare tactic, but most certainly one to make you think twice about just being able to move around easily because you don't know where they're coming from. Ooh, I just saw something new on Skype. Cool. Yes, and that is a good segue, Blue. Do you want to go into it?
Oh, I was going to say if you wanted to. Yeah, so actually that is actually something they called out right there as well. They say that it's also worth remembering that just because the weather picks up doesn't mean the moon's combatants disappear. Even though it looks like the snow is shooting at you, it's not. So with nearly zero visibility and a falling Kel to stop, it might not hurt to pack a thermal scope, which sounds really cool because that means we're going to get some new... Sounds like that might be one of the new perks or the new loadout options with these weapons.
Oh yeah.
And then chat's talking about like, for anyone who has audio cues or who relies on audio cues during gameplay, this is gonna mess with them. Like you're not gonna be able to hear those audio cues that you are used to hearing when enemies show up or enemies are around you. You won't be able to hear that.
Guess who's going to be really good at this? Me. He doesn't get the audio cues in the first place.
This is true.
What up?
Yeah, I use a lot of audio cues, so I'm going to be one of those who's going to be screeching like you were when the Promethean night for the first time.
All of a sudden, it was there. What was I supposed to do?
It was great. It was like the bad guy from Scooby-Doo in your face.
Oh my god, it was not there, and then it was.
No, I think this whole concept that they're talking about with the thermal scopes is a really clever way to implement something they've had in game prior, but just didn't really have a ton of use. And it's similar to the highlights that you get. I think it was an old Rise of Iron coin, one of the ones that you could have on there. It was able to highlight enemies. And there's a few other... I'm trying to think of the one that used to have the wall hacks. Was that the Titan helmet? Well, Wishender does that, but there's a few.
Oh,
others.
yeah. That was
One-Eyed Mask.
Yeah, I think that was One-Eyed Mask. I don't Titan, so I think that sounds right.
Yes, One-Eyed Mask does in fact do that.
Yeah,
and also doesn't crouching ghost
Hunter.
knives do that too? Yeah,
if you get a precision shot, but
right.
But that's using that same mechanic, and I think it's a nice way for them to use that same cue in a different way to be able to have a scope now rather than have to perform a special task to get it or have a special thing. Sounds of nature.
Yeah, so talking about the audio cues, that actually talks about the different levels of the volume. So he goes on to say the gust of wind rushing past your ears, the creaking of structures as they bend and sway, even the silence. And in many cases, you hear a storm before you see it. And the audio team wanted to give Europa an identity and a voice, so they introduced a unique palette of sounds that would establish it as a recognizable and real place in the Destiny universe. So this kind of gets into like how they do, like it always fascinates me how they do sounds within video games. Like one of my favorite things with the Halo games is when the sound team shows like how they make all the weapon sounds, like where they go out to the range and they're just like, oh, we're just gonna shoot this giant 50 caliber gun, but then they start like shooting it into water bottles and different stuff. Similar thing here. So they talk about to achieve sounds that would invoke an alien wasteland that is familiar but subtly unusual, alien and otherworldly. They talked to Keith, I think it's Soquist, noted that a video shared by Peter Comley of seal sounds really inspired him. So specifically, descending tones, clicks, and booms were noted on how closely tied to the icy environment and naturally evocative of cold and hardness they felt. So a lot of the sounds are inspired by seals, apparently.
That's kind of cool and slightly scary.
Well, it's also really funny because what that reminds me of is the audio that they did in Halo for a lot of the Covenant more animalistic sounds. That's a pug.
Really?
It's a pug. Yeah. Like a lot of the snuffles and grunts and stuff, that's a pug that they walk around with a giant mic next to it. And he's like that's, I'll have to look up the documentary that they did on him. It was really funny.
That's cool. I remember they did the Vidoc years ago about the different sounds and the Foley art that they used specifically for the Vex, and how a lot of the Vex were actually like metal being cut or punched and stuff like that, added in with a little bit of the electronic music manipulator type thing. But Foley art is such an interesting concept because you can use so many different everyday sounds and just manipulate them just slightly and get a whole new flavor.
Yeah, the pug is Gyoza, and it's mostly he's for Halo Infinite. He's the one that makes the alien noises. It's really, really adorable. But yeah, they did a whole
Nice.
little thing on it for him. So I mean, and I guess the other thing too is like, the whole clicking and booms. If you've ever seen them play with ice tubes, like if you've ever seen them do that, like where they're like, I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it's really cool. Like they'll drop like stuff down. Like I think they drop like metal into the tubes, or they drop, different coins and stuff like that. They did a lot of it with at the North and South poles, because they were basically showing how the sound waves are warped by the ice. Like the ice actually changes the way the sound waves travel. It's really cool to watch. So after running the information through their audio software, they use the game data to alter the pitch, the volume, and the trigger frequency of the sounds. So what they did was they actually took the sounds that were the seal sounds or whatever the initial sounds were, and then they plugged it into aspects such as those intensities, those 3 different levels of intensities, because then the intensities would be correlated to alter the soundscapes in real time. So in the same way that they are able to summon storms on demand, the storms that are being summoned, the level of the intensity of that particular event is going to also naturally drive the change in the audio sounds that you're hearing.
So the triggering is probably the most important aspect of it, the change of the triggering frequency, because the way that most sound works, and this is just from a scientific perspective, when you're learning about timbre in an instrument, certain instruments do have a type of frequency signature. Like a violin is a very, very easy one to say, has a very particular sense of frequency. But if you put a violin next to a saxophone and you take out, they're playing the exact same note, and you take off the first instant, the trigger, the strike, you actually have a harder time distinguishing between the two, because they're so similar. So the fact that they are manipulating the sound in such a way that they are changing the initial strike frequency will make it unrecognizable to us as a standard sound. So like a dog snorting or coughing or anything like that would not sound like that to us, because it doesn't have that initial familiar sound. It's not assigned, because our brains actually process the first part of a sound more so than the sustain.
That makes a lot of sense, actually.
That actually does. Yeah, that does make a lot of sense. It's interesting, like hearing you say that though, because like, it's yeah. So like, think about the old keyboards that had different instruments. Once you they were always terrible sounding because the strike was computer generated. It wasn't an actual strike that you would get from an instrument that would be there. But once you had the strike, if you played a saxophone or a cello or whatever and had one hand be one thing and the other hand be the other, you actually would have a harder time distinguishing them, because we did not have the technology to map the frequency levels within the actual MIDI or whatever soundboard was being used for that software for that instrument. So luckily, with time and a lot more people who are way smarter than I am, they have been able to develop much, much better sound samples for use electronically.
Right.
But initially, it was very, very difficult to come up with something that sounded real.
Yeah, chat's talking about a couple of those things. Black Flag says that's kind of like why your own voice sounds differently to you than it does to other people. Like you perceive your voice differently. And then Neo actually brought up another really cool example of the difference in sounds. If you haven't ever watched this, I really strongly suggest you go do this. But go watch a video of someone skipping a stone on a frozen lake. If you haven't seen it, it is the coolest sound. It's so cool. But yeah, so that was another example that Neo brought up that I really wanted to bring up as well. But yeah, so anyways, so to go back to the way that the data is connected to everything within the soundscape, or it's connected and that alters the soundscapes. So they took the underlying soundscapes of like what Green was talking about with the triggering frequency, the game data to alter pitches, the volumes and all that. They coordinated and connected that into the different intensities of the environment, and then that was then underlaid under an additional wind loops and structural sounds that they added to the different locations. And they tied all of these things, these variables, they tied them all to the same game inputs. And what they came back with was that it's making the Europa storm feel much more dynamic and unique. So you're not going to get, I'm not going to say you won't get repeats, but you won't get the same cookie cutter storm experience, on the same, like every mission is going to have a slightly different experience, hopefully. And so that's where the technical mechanics of how they did all this was really cool. Watching the sound team come in and be like, this is where we got the sounds and all this, but then watching the actual devs and take that information and see like and connect it in a data point, like in a way of a database, was just really cool to read about.
I think it's going to be probably, we talk about like breaking norms in video games all the time with like pushing the limits of what a software can do. This is not necessarily, I don't know if this is pushing the limits of the software because I'm not a coder and I don't exactly understand that, but it is something I would say is, I don't know of any other game that would do something like this to this extent when it comes to the sound. We've seen environmental changes, but sound is often just piped in to be very, very similar across the board. And the fact that we have something that's much more dynamic, it'll help with the immersion. I think I'm going to like running around Europa purely just for the sound design at this point.
I mean, like you'll see similar stuff with like No Man's Sky, other like completely open world games will have similar concepts, but you're right, I don't know of any that like dive into like this level. I know like Elder Scrolls does some similar stuff with not necessarily weather sound, but like environmental sounds. They do a bit of that, especially with Skyrim they did. And I know like with Halo Infinite they're doing some similar stuff as well with the different like what we were talking about with the aliens, like the actual creatures. I don't know. I'm assuming that this is gonna, like, once it's the nature of the beast. Once something is done, then everyone starts doing similar concepts to it. And so, but what's cool about this is like even if someone does a similar concept to it, it's gonna be its own flavor. It's gonna be its own unique process, and it's gonna result in something that is distinct and unique in that particular situation. So even if someone were to copy this, this logic, it's going to result in something that is completely different. And I think that's what's really cool about talking about this particular thing and about them showing like kind of the logic behind it is like, if we can get games to do this, I mean, with the new generation of hardware that's coming out, that's going to also allow people to push a little bit further into it. So I'm really kind of excited about it.
Question real quick. This is just kind of a across the board. I know they talked about having a new system that they were working with, but I can't remember if it was for Beyond Light that this was going to be utilized.
Yes.
It was not the same system that they developed D2 on. So they've actually had to create, or at least port over, all the old assets into the new system. Do you remember what system it was?
Go for it.
As far as I know, the new system they're really doing it. It's a system of like developer tools to make it easier for them to actually upgrade the game later. It doesn't really affect the way we play it at all. It's a way to make their lives easier. So it's like a quality of life upgrade.
Okay,
but it's not a new engine. No.
Yeah,
there's no new engine.
It's a quality of life
for the developers. It's not for us.
That's good, though.
Yeah, it's really,
we can make
really
their
good.
lives easier.
There is an AI kind of upgrade a little bit. which is really fascinating, and I'm really interested to see how they're going to implement this, is that they're changing the way the AI kind of recognize us in the game. So instead of, for example, like Nokris was last week for the Grandmaster Nightfall. So, for example, if I am the last one alive and my two teammates are very dead and I am panicking and screaming, much like many people have heard before. And the thrall, if you're hiding, they can't find you because it's based on the location and not on you as the player. So they don't see you, they don't know where you are, they don't interact with you. In Halo, it's different because they know where you are because like you are the interaction point. It's not like the area at large. So I think, they're moving from the mission host to the physics host. That's what Blue said in chat. So,
okay.
Yeah, so it's going to recognize us now more as a threat. So if we're by ourselves and we're running out of ammo, then it's probably, I think, going to be a lot more aggressive than it has been in the past. Because we've been really able to abuse kind of the engine. Yeah. Especially just like, I don't know how many of you guys have played a lot of Skyrim, but when you get up in levels, you can just take pot shots at like the hardest bosses from the doorway because you haven't triggered them. With what?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
No, I have no idea either. I definitely have never done that.
Played with bows exclusively in that game.
Yeah, I only sneak.
It's a legit strategy, okay?
My hunter in that game, like my cat has the best thighs in that game because of all the sneaking and bow shooting it does. That's all it does.
Sneaky kitty.
Sneaky bow shoots. So I'm assuming it's going to be more like Halo, starting with this new kind of the change of host. I'm hoping.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. I know it's not the same, or it is the same engine, but it's not necessarily going to affect us. I wonder if it actually will, because one of the things they talked about was making the tables, like they're reframing them, or how would you explain that, Jay?
That faces I know are different.
Well, that was an interesting thing. So like the mission scripting model is going to be like what Orchid was saying. But the other thing that they're doing is they're revamping the content building and patching pipeline. So basically what they're doing is, and chat's kind of talking about this too, they didn't, in hindsight, they didn't expect D2 to last this long. So they have, it's kind of like any system. It's kind of a curse of its own making because all the legacy code is now getting in the way of itself.
Right.
Which, that's not a dig at them. That is literally every video game out there. That is everything. So what you can do, so like one of the things that they're doing right now, that they're talking about, to go back to the physics host instead of the mission host, is one of the features that they mentioned in the TWAB was face-to-face joins in social spaces. So basically you can jump into a fire team with tower friends instead of having to reload the tower, which is a really cool thing. So, and of course, like they also call out, the new scripting will change things in a very complex thing. So, there's obviously going to probably be bugs. Just walk into it with that awareness.
Right.
But the other thing for the content building and stuff like that, the downside, if you want to call it that, is that it will be a full re-download for everybody because we're having to kind of
you mean you have to deal with the same thing that the PlayStation players have to do every time.
For those on Xbox and PC, apparently we have to experience the PlayStation.
I'm not happy about that. And I'm on both, so I'm like, I have to download what now?
Right. Yeah.
But apparently it's going to be available before it comes out, so
not
you can
only is it going to be available
it
before it's come out, but it's also going to be 30 to 40% smaller. Like, it's huge amount.
It is huge now. It takes up the majority of my PlayStation.
Yeah, it's gonna. I think they said it's cutting it down to somewhere between 60 and 70 gigabytes, which I think right now it's like 140 or something. But yeah, let me see. Black Flag mentioned it. Yeah, so the whole thing that the shift is, real quick, is that's actually the technical reason that you see sunsetting. To be honest, that is at the core, that is why you have sunsetting happen.
Thank goodness.
And so basically what it's gonna do is, what is it? He said, like, complete shippable content builds were frequently taking north of 12 hours. So now they've got it down to sub 12 hours, which is huge. They basically cut the shipping time that they took. It took work to allow them to cull content that we've upgraded or replaced. They addressed the limited capabilities. It's just a lot of stuff that they needed to clean house on. They've actually had time to go back and do stuff. Let me see the other thing that it was. Yeah, then they mentioned the rebuilt the face system, which gives me hope that we'll eventually get to a point where we can upgrade our face. Apparently the faces will look a little bit different, but it is not giving us the ability to change the face yet.
Boo.
But it's a step in that direction. Like, it is a step in that direction eventually. But
I don't know about you guys. I'm still happy with my face. Like,
I just want to be able to change my hair.
I love my warlock, but my god, my hunter, I was like memeing when I made it, and it's just like the most horrific exo I've ever seen, and I regret everything, and I always keep the helmet on. It's essentially Shax, just never take the helmet off.
I always keep the helmet on.
I always keep the helmet on. I never want to do that.
Shax has buck teeth underneath the helmet because he messed up in the character creation screen.
Yep, there
it's
you go.
confirmed.
It's canonical. The other big thing is they were able to relight portions of some of the spaces. So basically they took, and they I don't know if this is necessarily new for Beyond Light. I think they're doing similar things to what they did with Shadowkeep. The lighting system that they used in Shadowkeep was, if I remember, that was a really big step forward for how it... I remember them talking about, like, the way that they did, it's not ray tracing necessarily, but it's kind of that kind of concept, is it uses shadows and uses the angle based off how the environment has things that block it, and the way that the system picks up on those elements. They changed and updated for Shadowkeep. So I think they're basically bringing the EDZ and Nessus areas up to spec as far as that. Because, I mean, that's, 4 years now that they've been there.
Teal with a weird mouth and pink hair spikes? That sounds like an amazing, like, 80s homage exo orchid.
It sounds like my hair at this very moment.
I liked your, like, that picture you posted earlier.
Thank you.
Good picture.
Yeah, my hair's obnoxious right now.
We should round out this episode.
We should. We're done.
I will also say I think it was David Aldridge, did a Reddit AMA with the Destiny engineering manager, who was Chris Kosinovich. This was from a few months back, so it's a little bit, it's a little bit dated information, but it's still it's still worth going through and reading it. And that's all in the Bungie TWAB from last week, I believe, the 24th, September 24th. So yeah, last week. It's all in that particular TWAB. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, that is all to kind of come back to Europa. I think that it's going to be, that's why I'm expecting it to be kind of like another Shadowkeep kind of hop, in that we see a lot of things that they're going to be trying to experiment with, which I'm always excited when they do that, because you get some really fun, both fun, ridiculous, and fun, like, actual stuff happen in game. Like, I always, Zavala visiting us at the tree. That was a fun surprise. Don't stand to the right of Eris.
I so wish I kept that clip of Cole getting just thrown against the wall and killed.
I got yeeted when I did it too, because I stood in the exact wrong spot, and it was really funny. I could not stop laughing.
Good times. So do we have any shout outs for this episode, since we've kind of
just basically welcome to Orchid. Thanks for putting up with our insanity, and thanks for chat. I've been having fun with chat this round.
Shoutables.
They've been keeping me on my toes with the introduction to new words.
Yeah, shout out to Orchid. We're going to shout her right out here. Also, Dancing Vuru with all the bulls that we could ever.
They're amazing. They give me life today.
I feel like it's almost like a second language. You know how like when you're a kid, you learn Pig Latin. This one feels like another language. We created a new thing, guys.
It's the Focus Fire language.
It's the Focus Fireables.
Yep, Focus Fireables, guys.
Speakables.
Speakable.
Yes.
I have a friend named Speakable.
Nice.
Shout out to Speakable.
How about a shout out to Orchid Streams? The most funnable, haloable, screamable, Prometheanable, nightable.
Oh, jeez. Yeah,
there is an amazing clip of her screaming.
It is.
Have we mentioned that clip?
Have we? Yes, many times. Please mention it again. It's very funny. You can find it on my channel. Hey, it's working. On
or
Twitch.
you can ask Pins.
You can ask Pins. He will supply it to you.
Pins has like a Rolodex of Twitch clips. I'm pretty sure at this point.
There's another one of me smashing. One of my first clips was me smashing my face into the wall when I was streaming with Rick during the Rasputin bunkers. Because I always jumped at the wrong time, and I just jumped straight into the wall and would like just catapult myself and kill myself. I also screamed on Raspy. Yeah, every time, like every single time. It's just without fail, I would do it. I mean, I did it on purpose 90% of the time, but.
Some of those bunkers were much more difficult than others because I had the wires hanging down.
Yeah, they had the random subways. I mean,
okay.
They had the random IO subway. I am still. It's you know what? It's so they could take the subway to their Zen garden. It's so Eris could get to her pineapple garden. That's why the subway is there. Guys, we solved it. It's the Pineapple Garden subway. It's the Pineapple Express.
Pineapple Express. So anyways, thank you for your time. And until next time, remember, with wisdom we conquer, stand strong, stand tall, and keep exploring. With that, we'll begin to wrap the chat up. Thank you again to those over on Twitch for coming to spend your evening with us. If you'd like to join us for the live streaming of the episodes, please be sure to give us a follow over on twitch.tv/FocusFireChat. Links to all our episode archives can be found at www.thelorenetwork.com. Please be sure to email us at focusfirechat@gmail.com with any comments and or questions for the team concerning the podcast, and let us know how we're doing by giving us some feedback and a rating over on iTunes as well. So until next time, focus your fire and may your light shine bright.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.